If you enjoy watching UFC, then you're probably itching to get your hands on the hyper-realistic game EA Sports UFC. So in typical Digital-Tutors style, let's take a close look at some of the technical aspects of the game and see what the devs over at EA Canada have been creating. As with any fighting game, the most important thing to get right are the fighters that you control. Since there are really only two important characters on the screen at one time, there should really be no excuse for having low-resolution characters, and it's definitely apparent that the modeling department did an amazing job with UFC. And not only did the fighters have an uncanny resemblance to their real-life counterparts, but the amount of detail that went into the characters is amazing, from the cauliflower ears and even the veins that pop out of the skin as they celebrate a win. It's pretty apparent that the majority of the poly count for the game went to the fighters. So if you've watched any UFC on television, you know that the typical setup is to have all the lights shining on the octagon, and the rest of the stadium is in pretty much complete blackness. And the devs definitely use this to their advantage. You can see from this shot that the crowd is only visible for a few rows back before going completely dark. This allows the devs to get as much detail into the fighters as possible without spending some of the polygon budget on the characters in the stands, which you probably won't really pay attention to anyways as you're trying to get a good knockout in. Not only were the fighters modeled extremely well, but the character rigs that were created had some great controls that really helped to breathe even more life into the fighters. For example, there's a really great muscle system that looks to be on just about every part of the models, so when a fighter gets punched, there's some really nice jiggle effects that happen across the body, or when a fighter lands a punch, you can see the ripple effect happen down his arm. And if we slow down this shot, you can see the ripple moving across our fighter's stomach. These great effects really help to make these characters feel like real people and not just action figures fighting. The way this effect was achieved looks like a mixture between a muscle system in the key areas on the body, as well as some trickery with animated textures. For example, you can see the rig in action right here. Pay close attention to our opponent's calf muscle as he falls down, and you can see the subtle jiggle effect that happens across the calf, making the models feel that much more believable. And along with the great rigs, the effects in the game were spot on. For example, check out this shot as we get a few good punches in, and you can see the sweat bursts coming off the opponent's head, making the punches feel that much more powerful. Or in this shot, the blood that splatters on the floor of the octagon. These little effects were beautifully done, and it looked very believable. You can even see the blood spurts would travel in the direction of the punch. While these effects might not be for the squeamish, they're definitely cool. Now, we did notice a few issues with the animations in the game. Now, for the most part, they looked alright. However, during the knockouts, there would be some unusual jerkiness that would occur. In this shot, we knock this guy out, and it looks like he should spin completely around, but he stops suddenly and just drops. Or in this shot, as our opponent stumbles back into the fence and suddenly pops to a completely different position and then drops. Overall, the knockout animations and collisions could have used a bit more work. So one of the biggest problems we had with the game were the controls, or actually just the amount of controls required to play the game. Like most other fighting games, no matter the genre, you can kick and punch. Except with UFC, there's clinching and submission. Now these two techniques alone can really be in a game all themselves. So clinching is where the fighters look like they're hugging it out, except they're really just trying to figure out how to sneak a punch in. And with UFC, you can punch, kick, clinch, and do submissions. And that is a huge amount of possibilities, and having to have all those moves condensed on one single controller is going to cause some confusion. And the way the training was set up made the controls even harder to figure out. Now when you begin the career mode, you go through a quick training tutorial which goes over all the different fighting possibilities: punching, kicking, clinching, and submission. This is all well and good, and you get an understanding of the fighting possibilities. However, after the training, it throws you into your first fight. Suddenly, you have to remember all the controls that you just learned in the tutorial, and there are a ton of controls. You might be familiar with a scenario like this when you've just finished one of our creative tutorials. You'll begin your own project using the techniques just taught, but there may be times when you need to revert back to the tutorial to remember where a certain tool is located, and that's understandable because there's so much to take in. We ran into a scenario like this when playing UFC, however, there's no tutorial to revert back to when stuck. Each fighting possibility, whether it's clinching or submission, has enough button combos to fit in their own game, and getting thrown into your first fight, it's impossible to remember everything that was just taught, because one button combo standing up may do something completely different when on the ground. As you can see, our opponent is trying to get a submission in, and we are just trying to figure out what button combo you use to get out of a submission. Since there are so many controls in the game, it would have been smart if the devs incorporated on-screen instructions for your first few fights. After seeing that we've been stuck, it would be great to have some screen instructions like, hey, remember, clicking the left stick in and pressing this button will get you out of a submission, just to kind of refresh your memory a little bit. Another possibility would to have the first few fights in career mode be only certain fighting styles. For example, the first fight would be just standing up, the next would be submission, and so on. That way you can get a really strong grasp of the controls before moving on. So if you're working on a fighting game, or really any game, it's important that you give the player enough instructions to be able to play the game properly. Now, looking past some of the controls, this game is still fun, especially when playing local multiplayer, because there's nothing better than doing a little trash talking between friends and getting a couple good knockouts in. If you want to go toe-to-toe in the octagon with the Digital Tutors team, be sure to add us on Xbox Live or PlayStation Network with the gamertag Digital Tutors.